who reads your work or interact with them. So that's been one of the confines of the medium, and in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a comic book artist named Vaughn Bodie, who some of you may remember. And Vaughn had what they called their cartoon concert, where they would do slides of their comics and read all the lines of the characters and, appear as kind of a public event. Vaughn usually dressed rather outrageously when he did this. Wore makeup, wore high heels, etc. Did things like opening for the Grateful Dead, where everybody threw things at Vaughn and didn't really like that. But also did this at comic book conventions and was a big influence on a lot of us. So we're basically doing a series of cartoon concerts here at Pitt. We were doing them once a month. We're probably going to do them once every 2 months now. And before we get started, I want to point out that my amazing partner, Tamara Wyndham, also does an event where she combines her painting with live music and dance and ritual, and Tamara's going to do such an event next week, and I would like her to announce that event and hand out flyers for it. Tamara, if you want to come up here. Or down here.
Yes, so pass these out. Which one? This one?
That one.
The other one. This one?
Yeah.
Oh. So, hi. We're doing a ritual for the wolf spirit, and we're going to howl together, and there's going to be a dancer, Bread Pussy, who performed here at Pitt a couple months ago with me. Some of you saw that. Bread Pussy was accompanied by Kelvin, and also this time Eric and Jenny, who are here, are going to be performing. So it's going to be a wild and inspiring evening. I'm going to make a body print. I do body print paintings of Bread Pussy, and we're going to have a potluck dinner, and it is going to be so cool. And it's going to be in the West Village at Westbeth Artist Housing. So
when is it again?
Sunday, November 23rd.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And buy a book. I'm the bookseller over there.
Yeah, so anti-fascism, shouldn't be a very controversial idea, right? I think most of us can remember when being anti-fascist was sort of a given, right? I know for, my father's generation of my family, all the men in my father's generation participated in some way in World War II. If they were, more conventional Democrats, Republicans, regular guys, they were in the U.S. military, and if they were communists, they might have been in the Merchant Marine, which was actually more dangerous than being in the U.S. military. So that was just a given for them, but oddly enough, now this is a controversial idea because of the times we're in, the idea of being anti-fascist. So if this book had come out 10 years ago, it would have been a really nice graphic history about something important, well done, and interesting, but it wouldn't have been a big deal to people. But I think right now it's a big deal because we now have a government that says that being anti-fascist is something that they want to investigate. So the first speaker we're going to have is Raymond, who is both a writer for this anthology and one of the editors of the anthology, and did a comic strip with my old buddy Gary Dumb, and we're going to show that. Raymond?
There's a lot of y'all here. I didn't expect there to be that many. It was pretty cool. All right, cool, man. As Seth had mentioned, my name is Raymond Tyler. I like to say like a little bit of a, I don't like to be dishonest because my name's not really Raymond Tyler. It's a nom de plume. My real name is Raymond Tyler Woodsmall, and some of you already got the joke of why I wouldn't want that last name as mine. But to make a long story short, my mom was a author, and she had a poster up one time of her books when I was like in 5th grade, and this older kid came up where the poster was and said, "Woodsmall, I hate to be the kid with that last name." And so I changed that name very, very quickly. The moral of that story isn't change your name because somebody makes fun of it, but it's particularly funny. I'll just start a little bit about what I do in comics and that sort of stuff, and eventually here I'll read a little bit from the Soviet Partisans piece that I wrote. But I've been working in comics now since, I guess professionally, since 2021, and I became very interested in doing a form of comics of doing history from below. So that's telling stories of folks who might not be might not be written about. Not stories of great men, but stories of everyday ordinary folks who are the driving force of history. And a lot of times people are interested in like comics as that medium of like, well, why comics as a medium for history from below? And to me, I'll just tell you all just like a little bit of my inspirations and that sort of stuff. To me, the radical history of comics started in the 18th century. There was this really interesting artist named William Hogarth. I don't know if y'all know who William Hogarth was, but he was an 18th century artist, and he did a series of etchings called A Rake's Progress. And the story of A Rake's Progress it's not like that, interesting today, but at the time it was particularly interesting. These mass series of engravings showed the story of a man who gains wealth and slowly deteriorates over time. And this piece was actually met with a lot of ruling class scorn pretty immediately. And there was one particular writer named Horace Walpole who had a critique of comics, in this early time of the 18th century, even though it's not quite a comic, but I'm going to call it a comic for this particular event. He had an interesting critique, which is that this piece was particularly childish, right? And that's something that has constantly been a critique via the ruling classes, like that comics are for children and that comics aren't serious. And I think there's a good reason for that, why the ruling class tends to say that, because I think that it bothers people that there can be such a piece that is tight knit, that is easy, that everybody can understand, and it's just greatly accessible. So that's kind of what I like to say about why I particularly like this medium for comics. I think it's just historically been a medium that lends itself to being radical. So in a minute here I'm going to read directly from an essay that I wrote for this event, and then I'll read from the piece a bit. We'll get started. Cool. I'm just gonna start reading.
some light?
Sorry, say that again?
Do you need some light?
A little bit of light would actually be great. All right, cool. Alright, so I wrote this piece just for this event, so we'll just, just take it from there. When one thinks of World War II, images of the beaches of Normandy and U.S. exceptionalism tend to flood the mind of the average American. The popular imagination of anti-fascism has been directly co-opted by the ruling class. A narrative has formed in the minds of people that the United States defeated fascism, and any information counter to that narrative is met with immediate patriotic condemnation. This narrative is a result of a long history of words and images infiltrating and distorting the reality of the United States for the United States' own benefit. Much of our lives are mediated by words and images. And reach into your wallet or purse and examine a dollar bill. It contains not only the currency we must exchange to survive, but also an ideology and a history. We the people, and in God we trust, are printed over images of proud American presidents and thought leaders. This is just one example of how we are surrounded by the imagery and iconography of the ruling class. However, this means of social control extends far beyond the dollar bill. Films, books, and literature all have the ability to reinforce the status quo, especially when it comes to history. It was once pointed out to me that when I close my eyes and picture Victorian England, I'm not picturing history, I'm picturing the work of Charles Dickens. The same can be said about any historical event. Words and images synthesize in the mind to construct our understanding of reality and history. With this in mind, we can see how the fight against fascism has been co-opted and owned by the nation states. The message in histories is clear. The United States, Great Britain, and even the Soviet Union banded together to defeat the evil forces of fascism and save the world. And this narrative of World War II seems, whether intentionally or not, to encourage complacency. It suggests that if fascism ever rears its ugly head in the United States, will once again rise to defeat it. And nothing could be further from the truth. The United States has often flirted with or directly participated in fascism. And fascism is, of course, a right-wing, authoritarian, ultra-nationalistic political system. But even this description obscures its deeper nature. For me, fascism is a collection of myths and images. Myths and images that portray a strong nation-state with a singular identity and a mission to crush immigrants, leftists, and anyone who resists nationalism. There are countless insightful quotes and resources on what fascism is and how it manifests. For further reading, I highly recommend the work of Umberto Eco. But the main point I want to emphasize is how myths and imagery serve as a driving force for fascism. Images of strong men leading proud families, images of driving out the supposed evils of communism, images of immigrants and Semitic people as obstacles to prosperity, and of course, the demonization of the LGBTQIA. These are all fascist tropes, and each of them can be seen today in the imagery promoted by the Trump administration. Simply look at what the State Department posts on social media, you'll see these very ideas represented and proudly displayed by the U.S. government. For those not yet radicalized, it may seem as though the United States has taken a dark and unprecedented turn. This turn, while dark, is entirely predictable. Put simply, capitalism requires an extreme control over ordinary working people. Under capitalism, people must accept their place in life in the system, or else the system quickly collapses. Fascism redirects that frustration born of economic turmoil away from the true culprits and towards society's most vulnerable. Images and words are beamed into the minds of unsuspecting workers, often those with certain racial privileges, convincing them that their lives would improve if only immigrants and leftists were removed. This path inevitably leads to the destruction of vulnerable communities, the consolidation of wealth and power, and a racially privileged working class still trapped in the same economic misery, now stripped of solidarity and collective power. So why is it beneficial for the United States to control the words and images that shape people's understanding of World War II? The answer is clear. The belief that great men and states came together to defeat fascism removes any responsibility from the individual and leaving them feeling completely helpless. The belief that the United States is inherently anti-fascist suggests it is somehow immune to fascism itself. And by separating fascism from its economic and political roots, people lose the ability to recognize its rise. Yet, anti-fascists have long shown us how to resist. Spaces like this bookstore serve as a place where people can immerse themselves in words and images that equip us to fight fascism. And when partisan groups, ordinary people, no different from you or me, created art, literature, and organized for direct confrontation with fascists, you got a page turn. Though the dominant forces of information and imagery often promote a narrative of helplessness in the face of fascism, I hope comics, literature, and music can offer a meaningful counterpoint. And my only hope for the book Partisans is that those involved in the anti-fascist struggle feel re-energized in their fight. Whether you're active in Black Bloc, labor unions, mutual aid networks, or socialist organizations, I hope the images and words in this book provide a moment of recognition for your work. It is not governments or great men who fight fascism. It is the people in this room and the people organizing right now, and please keep fighting. That's it. All right, so I'm going to read from this in just a bit, but a little bit, because I kind of skipped over some stuff, which is that, anytime I agree to do any sort of a book, it has to meet 3 criteria, and that's education, agitation, and organization. So the education piece with a nonfiction comic is pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward. If you weren't educated from the book, I kind of fucked up. But the agitation piece, you directly want folks to be able to see a parallel, like between the things that are going on in the book and the things that are going on in their lives. And the organization piece is more about who the publisher is and where the book's ultimately going to find a home. So places like this, anything like, donating the book to activist organizations. And if anybody is interested in this book for anything like, don't want to spend $25 a copy, just let me know. We can figure something out. And that's just kind of, what I hope for this book is that, people get to read it and instead of people necessarily having to buy it. But so this piece, Soviet Partisans, was a piece that I volunteered to write. And I got to work with an artist that I've always loved named Gary Dumb. Gary Dumb, for those who don't know, was a really amazing artist who did some stuff for American Splendor. I don't think I would be a comics writer without Harvey Keycard. So it was really surreal to write this piece that Gary ended up illustrating because I've grown up reading and looking at his artwork. So that was really surreal for me and really cool. And also the colors by Laura Dumb. And I'll also add that Gary was such a wonderful collaborator for this piece that he greatly helped the dialogue and the storytelling and all the things like that. I left a lot of, I would say in the first draft I left kind of dead space, and Gary was really great with filling some of that stuff in, adding some additional dialogue and that sort of thing. And he was wonderful to collaborate with. That's one of my favorite things about comics. If you want to have control over, everything you write without anybody else's input, I would say write a book. The comics process is absolutely a collaborative process, and it's the thing that, makes me want to keep working and writing in the medium. So, I'm going to go ahead and get started here on this Soviet Partisans piece. And I haven't read this piece out loud to a group of folks yet. So I'm hoping that it reads well, and we'll take it from there, man. We'll see what happens. All right. So what we see right now is we see a train that stopped on the road. And we see work quickly, eyes on the fucking tree line. You see something, you shoot something. What are partisans? Let them come. We'll chop them down like wheat. To fascists, partisans were a communist military operation engaging in barbarity across occupied territory. Where are they? Why don't they attack? You see, one Nazi thinking. The actuality of what and who partisans are is far more interesting. The partisans were an irregular force made up of anti-fascists. We see some Nazi jargon. Stay sharp, be ready, don't panic. Irregular military just means a military made of regular people and not uniformed armed forces. Now we see the tree line itself, the thing they've been focusing on. Fire. The partisans were placed in Nazi-occupied territory, and their primary tactics was to engage in guerrilla warfare. I love these blam, blam, blams. And they got good at it. And then we see our main character here for the first time, the character Levi. It says, move in and don't let any of them survive. And we pull back a little bit, and it's earlier that year in Moscow, June 22nd, 1941. A family sits listening to the radio, and for those of y'all who know your history, you might know whose voice this is. An area is occupied by the enemy. Partisan units must be established, motorized as well as on foot, and sabotage groups must be formed to engage in a hostile army, to unleash partisan warfare everywhere. Young Levi's head is immediately filled with fantasies of glory won in battle. To blow up bridges and roads, to disable telephone and telegraph lines, and set fires to woods, depots, and convoys. In the occupied areas, an untenable situation must be created for the enemy and his henchmen. They must be persecuted and destroyed at each step, and all their measures must be made to fail. National conscription for partisans was implemented in every major city. Russian patriots crowded in. Levi and many others pushed and shoved to sign up. There was much honor and pride involved. Name, Levi Arnovich. Age, 19. Documents. Partisans needed to be organized too. Then we see a plainclothes partisan. This militia will learn to follow orders and work as a unit. And Levi was proud to be doing his part. Soon the recruits were marching out to meet their fates. Left, civilian onlookers holding the Russian flag encouraged them as they marched by. Right, left, right, left, right, left. Although not yet trained, the recruits were getting in step. The first test of these partisans recruited in Moscow was simply the resolve to keep marching. Red Army trucks carrying supplies overtook the marching partisans as they walked from Moscow to Belarus. Other trucks brought rifles, some of which were outdated, old German models that didn't have ammunition. Sometimes the uniform didn't fit, or there wasn't enough of one size. But Levi's rifle fit just right in his hands. We see partisan training. We see aim small, miss small, work together, block the roads. The recruits received little to no training, and what training some got came directly from Red Army officers. However, Red Army officers were not well practiced in guerrilla warfare. The lack of formal training didn't stop the eager partisans from waging an all-out guerrilla war. Putting up anti-Nazi flyers, destroying infrastructure like bridges, and sabotaging railroads. And then we see a man who's explaining, he says, explosives go under the rail between the track and the railroad ties. Their blood up and excited partisans broke from cover. They sensed the victory could be theirs, and they weren't going to let it slip from their grasp. Their sabotage had worked well, and it was a turkey shoot. Except they weren't shooting turkeys, and up close Levi sees the bloody carnage that he has helped bring about. The dead and dying Germans on this military equipment train would never reach their destination. The war-stained woods of Belarus would be their grave, and the battle was won. You see my favorite bit of dialogue ever, which is just Nazi fucking scum. And he shoots the pig. It's pretty cool. In the quiet that followed, Levi vaguely heard some of his comrades laughing behind him and cheering their great victory. There was a feeling that no fiction could describe, a sickness of the material and ideal, the smell of corpses and the way that blood looked when it dried. Levi realized corpses looked nothing like men at all. He was reminded of when he was a child. He'd play dress-up in his father's old war clothes. He wondered if that was the way his body would look. The partisans stopped over 1,000 trains carrying critical munitions and supplies to the occupying Nazi forces. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That last page is gorgeous.
Thank you.
If people have questions, we will have a question and answer after everyone has spoken. The next speaker, and I'm changing up the order a bit, I think the next speaker should be Summer McClinton, if she will come up.
do that
Could,
thing
could
again.
she
I'm
use that
sorry.
flashlight again?
So maybe I'm gonna say something for 1 second before I start my tightly scripted video.
So tell me when to start it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Summer McClinton. I'm one of the artists. Actually, let's just start. Let's just do this. Okay. Hello, good evening. My name is Summer McClinton, and I'm a comic book artist. I'm here tonight as one of the illustrators of Partisans, a graphic history of anti-fascist resistance. The story I drew is called The Hungarian Resistance by Sander Feinberg. It's about the rise of fascism in Hungary and the resistance that rose to meet it from within a country whose government largely turned its back on its own people. It's written as a conversation between a grandfather and his granddaughter, and it's informed by the author's own grandfather, Kalman Markey, one of many who worked across borders, both literal and moral, to fight fascism during World War II. Kalman Markey's mission in the US was to rally anti-Nazi support. Inside Hungary, resistance networks worked to feed the starving, forge identity papers, and move Jewish families to safety. Resistance was practical, moral, and deeply human. It feels fitting to share this story here at a place called Property is Theft, because both the book and this space remind us that resistance isn't abstract. It's built from acts of care, courage, and imagination. What struck me most in illustrating the story wasn't the drama of espionage or the emergence of heroes, but the ordinariness of people rising to the occasion, cooking meals, caring for children, producing documents, delivering messages. I'm going to read a segment from the comic Hungarian Resistance by Sander Feinberg. World War II was about to explode. In 1938, the first Jewish law was passed in Hungary, limiting Jews in professions, businesses, and schooling. Hungarian laws in 1939 and 1941 defined Jews as a race, forbade intermarriage with non-Jews, and further restricted their ability to work. This increased their poverty, hunger, and suffering. In 1939, Jewish men were conscripted into harsh labor camps throughout Hungary. Over 27,000 perished due to starvation, unsanitary conditions, and lack of medical care. Jewish leaders in the country were in denial. We've been loyal Hungarian citizens. They won't treat us like the Jews of Poland and Germany. Other Jews, especially those with socialist or Zionist leanings, resisted the anti-Semitism despite the danger of standing up to the fascists. Many Budapest residents, including Joel and Hansi Brand, opened their homes to Jews fleeing Poland, Slovakia, and Germany. I knew that no matter the danger, we had to help the refugees, especially those with children. We supplied temporary shelter and helped with food. I worked with the Budapest Relief and Rescue Committee, formed in January 1943, to smuggle Jewish refugees across the border into Hungary. If the Hungarian police or the German Gestapo were to get an inkling of what was afoot, we might all be shot out of hand. In March 1944, everything changed. Hitler replaced Hungarian Regent Horthy with a fascist Arrow Cross leader and sent Adolf Eichmann and his stormtroopers to implement the final solution for Hungary's 800,000 Jews. Once the Germans occupied Hungary, Joel and Hansi Brand began to work with the underground organizations as the situation became more dangerous. Socialist and Zionist youth took enormous risks to help wherever they could. The underground resistance took many forms: forged documents, food, rescues, children's houses, and the Tio. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Is it Tio? The Tio, which means hike or outing in Hebrew, was a large operation to move young Jewish people to safety in Romania. They crossed the border on foot at night, often with the help of local smugglers. Although many smugglers asked for payment, some villagers, particularly Seventh-day Adventists, helped for religious reasons. Historians estimate 15,000 people escaped this way. Young Budapest resistors created 55 children's houses to take care of 5,000 orphans and abandoned Jewish children. A large team, led by David Gurr, forged birth certificates, identity cards, and over 120,000 Schutzpass certificates, Swiss letters of protection, which helped save over 62,000 Jews with the aid of Jewish agency leader Miklos Kraus and Swedish diplomat Karl Lepps. The Glass House, the Center for the False Document Production, also provided sanctuary for over 4,000 people fleeing the Nazis. By the time of the German invasion in 1944, the underground was feeding tens of thousands throughout Budapest. In January 1945, the 70,000 people crowded in the Jewish ghetto were in a horrific struggle for survival. A team, including Hansi Brand and Efra Agman, set up a warehouse with 25 employees and 20 wholesale food merchants to meet the needs. In 1944, the underground continued to make daring and controversial rescue attempts. 77 emissaries completed over 140 missions to warn residents in Hungarian rural areas of mass deportations and assist them to escape. Since Joel Brand spoke fluent German, he became a liaison between the Jewish groups and the Germans in Hungary. Brand was the principal negotiator with Adolf Eichmann in what became known as the Blood for Goods offer. Eichmann proposed releasing 1 million Jews in Europe in exchange for 10,000 trucks. The foreign allies would never agree to this deal, but desperate Jewish leaders thought the negotiations would slow down deportations to death camps. This strategy did not work. By July 1944, 437,000 Hungarian Jews, mostly from the countryside, including your ancestors from Stafetta, were sent to Auschwitz, where most perished. Although Brand's mission failed, it helped alert leaders outside Hungary to the dire situation. The story goes on from there. Toward the end of the story, Feinberg includes a quote by historian Jacques Semena. When a country is overcome by hatred and fear, when war and massacres spread like the plague, there are nevertheless always a few men and women who do not join the pack. Without a word, they step aside. In secrecy and danger, they prefer to help rather than denounce, protect rather than destroy. I keep returning to that phrase, without a word, they step aside. It makes me wonder at the clarity it takes to do that, or what looks like clarity only appears in hindsight. Reading it now, it's hard not to think about the moment we're in, when fear of the outsider is once again being cultivated and weaponized, when agents of the state target immigrants and refugees, operating with increased impunity. It reminds us that fascism doesn't announce itself with a single law or slogan. It grows in the space where people stop imagining each other as human. The people that quote describes, and the people featured throughout Partisans, remind us that even under conditions where our collective sense of humanity seems to be collapsing, conscience survives. But how do we not join the pack? And how do we know when to step aside? History can make it look simple, as if the people who resisted knew what to do, but I suspect they didn't. They were probably as unsure as we are, living through confusion and fear, just trying to take the next right step as it appears. What guided them wasn't certainty but conscience, that quiet internal compass that lets you move without needing to see the whole map. Sometimes I think about that with my own work. People ask how I choose my projects, and it's always a little embarrassing because I don't really choose in the strategic sense. I just keep saying yes to whatever finds me, to what shows up. It's not that I don't care, it's that I trust the pattern underneath will reveal itself. And over time, I've realized that even without a plan, what finds me is remarkably consistent. That's what trust looks like. Not knowing exactly where you're going, but knowing you're moving in alignment with yourself. And maybe that's what the resistance looks like too. Not a master strategy, or even a clear picture of victory, but a steady willingness to meet what arises with conscience and care. Maybe we're already part of something larger, even if we can't see it yet. Thank you.
Next up is Isabella Bannerman.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so like a lot of you, I'm only here because of my mother. So this is titled The Little Messenger. In Italian, it would be Piccola Stafetta. And a Stafetta was the Italian word for courier. And a lot of the women partisans were called Stafette because they were very good at smuggling papers and even smuggling revolvers into the false pocket of a purse and so on. So that's why I chose that title. And I just want to thank you for the chance to be together and speak with you tonight. I'm honored, and my family are honored to have been able to contribute to this project. I've been a contributor to World War III Illustrated on and off for more than 30 years. I'm a firm believer in the format of an anthology comic book because it allows for different perspectives and artistic styles within the same theme, so it reveals many facets of the same theme. In this case, resistance to fascism in World War II. Like a lot of people who have been through wars, my mom didn't talk about the scary parts. She talked about food shortages, like having nothing to eat but polenta or roasted chestnuts, or trading her mom's jewelry to buy a dozen eggs. I remember when in Italian restaurants, all of a sudden polenta became very fashionable, and my mom was always shocked at the prices people could get for an appetizer of polenta. That was just one of her pet peeves. But when she listened to Trump's inauguration speech in January of 2017, she couldn't help but hear the similarities between his words and the words of Mussolini. So in the next slide, I'm going to ask you to play a little word game with me. And you have to read these speeches, excerpts, and guess who said it. These are just two examples. We will no longer accept politicians who are all talk and no action. The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour for action. Democracy is talking itself to death. I have stopped the talk and the nonsense. I'm a man of action. The people have created with their blood the empire, fertilized it with their work and defended it. Whether we are black or brown or white, we all bleed the same red blood of patriots. And you just see the similar themes of gearing people up to violence and to war, and gearing people up to accept these concepts. And there's many more examples from the speeches that have the similar tone and similar philosophy behind them. And that's why my mom she said, I recognize this, I know what I'm hearing. And she became very talkative after that. Which is which?
Oh,
Okay, yes.
so the one on the right, the one on the right, which starts with the word democracy, that's Mussolini. The one on the left is Trump. On the lower level, the one on the left is Mussolini, and the one on the right is Trump. So a lot of stories started coming out that I never heard before.
stories about her friend's father being arrested in the middle of the night by the black shirts, the Comici with loud banging on the door. She said they would always come at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. It was part of the humiliation to take someone away from their family at 5 o'clock in the morning when they were still in their pajamas. Ordinary people being forced to suddenly line up in the street for a so-called examination. One of them, a pregnant woman who decided to talk back, was hit in the belly by a Nazi soldier. Because the city she lived in, Torino, was full of factories, it was heavily bombed by the Allies, and she survived several narrow escapes. As a child, she was brainwashed. She was sent every Saturday to a fascist school from noon to 6 p.m. to be brainwashed into the philosophy of the regime. She was taught to blame the British for everything, that the British were barbarians, and that Mussolini would return Italy to its glory days of the Roman Empire. Her mother and father didn't like Mussolini. They were liberal, but her father was threatened by the henchmen of the regime if he hadn't sent her to this school, the regime would have taken away all his passports, all the family's passports. So they basically would have lost citizenship. So this was a very important detail for me to absorb because it made me realize that ordinary citizens might find it very difficult to resist. People being threatened and being put in situations. I think my grandfather did the best he could to protect his family at that time. But it also helped me to appreciate the risks of the people who did resist. And the sacrifices that they made. So then we go back to my drawing of my mom on the left. The indoctrination that my mother received at that school was effective. She described that all of her love of her country was wrapped up in the cult of Mussolini. But even at the age of 8, she knew it was wrong to be told all of a sudden to stop playing with her Jewish friends. As the youngest in a family of one older brother and 2 sisters, she was mostly unaware of her siblings' activities. They purposely didn't tell her anything for her own safety. And at that time, everybody would be going by a nickname or a first name basis only for the same reason, to protect each other. And I hope you do enjoy reading the chapter of my mom's adventure in the mountains. That she took part in what probably was a vital maneuver. This is just a frame from when everything was all clear and she skied back down to the village. But what impressed me most about the people she was with was their ingenuity and the trust that they developed in order to help each other. For example, her older brother's job gave him access to a car. So he was able to smuggle a Jewish family over the border to France. Her older sister taught English to Italian partisans. She had to do this in secret because it was forbidden and she could have been arrested. But it turned out to be a vital contribution once the British and the Americans came in to help in Italy's liberation. When I researched the stories of other women in the Italian resistance at that time, I learned how they turned their talents to help. I drew my mother being excited to learn how to knit so she could make mittens and socks for the partisans in the mountains. Another figure that emerged was the teacher Ada Gobetti, who had access to a printing press, so she made leaflets. And there were stories of seamstresses who were making civilian clothing for deserting soldiers. And there's also the quite famous writer Iris Dorigo, who kept diaries and left an incredible record of resilience and bravery. But lest we underestimate their contributions, it is important to note that Italian women secured the right to vote in 1946, a direct result of the organizing they had done during the resistance. These stories gave me a lot of hope because they illustrated the principle that we all have an innate sense of right and wrong, and we all have unique talents that we can use and contribute to help each other. And tonight is dedicated for me to the memory of Luisa Cetti, the writer, historian, and feminist from Milan, who listened to and edited and helped to shape the chapter Piccola Stafetta. She died suddenly this October, but she was very helpful. She was quite willing to get up or stay up late at night so that we could have Zoom calls with my mom all the way in San Francisco to help shape the story. Due to her copious knowledge of Italian feminism, she made sure that my mom's single story fit into a larger picture of the movement. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Isabella. You are the heart and soul of this anthology. Next will be Kevin Pyle.
All right, thank you all for coming out, and thank you to Raymond Tyler as the editor, and also I couldn't be here tonight, but Paul Buell is the other editor on this, and I first worked with Paul back on the Wobblies book 1,000 years ago, and so you should look up Paul and all the projects he's done, because he's basically translated the history of the left into comics, and he's employed a lot of comic artists over the years, so shout out to Paul. If there are any Croatian, Slovenian, or Serbian folks in the audience, I apologize in advance for my pronunciation. I tried, I researched it, but I'm sure I'll get it wrong. Croatia, former Yugoslavia. Spomenik. At the end of a gravel road in the woods along the Sava River stands a geometric abstraction of a tree. Like many such monuments scattered throughout the former Yugoslavia, it is strikingly modernist in its design and in varying degrees of disrepair. A concrete wall with an embedded plaque is riddled with gunshot holes, and an exterior sculpture was broken up and stolen years ago. It marks the spot where on June 22nd of 1941, 10 young men, all members of communist groups, met under a grand elm tree in Brizovica forest near the town of Zizek. They were driven to this moment by the brutal oppression of ethnic Serbs, Jews, Roma, and anyone labeled a dissident by the independent state of Croatia, NDH, the fascist puppet regime of the Axis forces. The men formed the first Zizak partisan detachment, the first armed and organized resistance to Axis fascism in Yugoslavia. It would grow to members mostly Croats, and the most notable exception of one woman, Nada Dimic, an 18-year-old ethnic Serb. They began their resistance activities immediately after the meeting, destroying rail lines, disrupting communication, attacking municipal buildings, seizing arms, and building a local support network. The Ustasi, the brutal wing of the NDH, sent 500 troops to destroy them, and the first detachment was forced to retreat across the Sava River in September of 1941. They would combine with the other brigades to form the Banija partisan unit in Cordon, but Nadia was not with them, having been captured and sent to prison in Zagreb in July. When I visited Croatia in 2019, my choices were made primarily on the aesthetics of particular monuments. We're going to southeast Zizak, Podgoric, and Jasenovac. Nobody ever goes there. Only later did it feel like I was chasing ghosts. On the top of a steep hill, 45 minutes to the northeast of Zizak, sits the monument to the revolution of the people of Monslavina. It looks like a space fighter left by aliens. The lack of signage and pavement riven with cracks give it an air of marking a history no one celebrates anymore. According to the designer Dusan Janojam, the wings represent triumph over death and defeat. Later his son would say that the 5 edges of the wings stood for the 5 republics of Yugoslavia. In this way, the design manifests Tito's political intentions to celebrate a new nation of brotherhood and unity, freed from the nationalist and ethnic divisions. From 1945 to 1961, over 14,000 such monuments, known as Spomeniks, were built throughout Yugoslavia. By rejecting the social realist style of the Soviet Union, the Spomeniks would both forge Yugoslavia's own identity and avoid identifiable imagery that was considered divisive. Spomenik scholar Donald Niebel writes, "People were meant to see an optimistic future and a reconciled past, a proud and unified and healed Yugoslavia. When that future collapsed, thousands were destroyed, either with animus or indifference." Looking around at the surrounding hills, one can imagine the extensive hospital, support, and command complex that was hidden here. The hospital mostly served the 10th Zagreb partisan groups and grew large enough to treat 700 wounded at once. But despite their hidden location, they did suffer casualties from Axis attacks. Here are buried 900 soldiers from the wider area of Monslavina who sacrificed their lives for the freedom and independence of our nation during the national liberation struggle from 1941 to 1945. This was a popular site for tourists and historical celebrations before the War of the 90s. We had a short conversation with a man who'd grown up in the area, but now lived in Australia. I wondered, but didn't ask, if he had left then as well. "My father fought the Nazis here." The pride on his face contrasted with the abandonment of the place. It was a beautiful sunny afternoon when we arrived at the Stone Flower of Jasenovac. Unlike many sites, this one is well maintained despite its far-flung location. It is built on the site of the largest Ustazi death camp, just across the current border from Bosnia and Herzegovina, at the confluence of the Sava and Una rivers. As my family walked on, I stepped into the darkness of the small museum. Names of the victims scrolled by on illuminated screens. I quickly realized I wasn't prepared to engage with the brutal legacy of the place. At one time, this was one of the largest concentration camps in all of Europe. This is the evil the partisans were fighting. Lacking the industrial killing infrastructure of the Nazi camps, extermination took the form of particularly intimate and brutal methods, employing knives, axes, and hammers. Overwhelmed by the enormity of it, I just took pictures of everything to read later. I felt ashamed that I'd come to this place to draw, not to mourn. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I was struck by the incongruity of the sunny scene before me. Mounds rise up in random spots around the road and path. A map told me these marked sites of death camp buildings, while graves are marked by hollows. I wonder if the pier I saw was the location of the barge landing that took prisoners across the river for mass executions. The Jazan in Jasenovac means ashen, referencing the ash tree common to the area. Likely the wooden path I walked on, comprised of railroad ties and that carried the prisoners to this place, are made of ash. It is also likely it was made by the prisoners themselves. At the base of the flower is a crypt lined with more wooden railroad ties. A plaque contains an excerpt of the poem Jama, the Pit, by Croatia Jewish poet Ivan Goran Kovacic. A brutal anti-war poem that depicts the crimes of the Ustasi. The title references the sinkholes in the karst stone that the victims were thrown into. It tells of a boy, his eyes gouged out, left for dead, who crawls out of the pit to smell the burning of his village. He then joins the partisan forces. Kovacic himself joined the Partisans in 1942 and is said to have been killed a year later, his throat slit by the Chetniks. First printed during the war, Jama was once read by every child in the schools of post-war Soviet Yugoslavia. The poem echoes another I'd read that was posted outside a sinkhole in the Slovenian highlands. Here the Partisans had used the extensive caves and gorges to their tactical advantage throughout the war. But as the war wound down, the landscape became an accomplice in a series of reprisal killings known as the Foib, sinkhole massacres. As knowledge of the massacres of NDH and collaborators in Hudo-Jama, Kochekvisky, Rogue, and Kulan Vakuf emerged, the intent of the Spomeniks was eroded, and the meaning of Tito's most famous words took on a different meaning. We have spilt a sea of blood for the brotherhood and the unity of our peoples, and we shall not allow anyone to touch or destroy it from within. The monument to the uprising of the people of Cordon and Banija was the most spectacular and ruined of any of the sites we would visit. Using what looked on GPS like a faster way, we drove up a steep, rutted gravel road. Later I see it marked as, "Do not go this way," on the website Spomenik database. Walking through its broken and twisted shell, it's hard to imagine that it once held a museum, conference rooms, and an amphitheater. Based on what the designer called sliced segments, it is inadvertently prophetic in its abstraction. It was to be the crowning glory of the anti-fascist struggle. The ruin sits on top of a mountain of Petrova Gora. Before it was stripped of most of its metal, it shone a reflection that could be seen for miles around, intended as the light overcoming the darkness. But located in a breakaway Serbian Republic during the 90s war, and without clear ownership to this day, the site has no official protection. This Spomenik was dedicated to the deaths of ethnic Serbian peasants and partisans who died fighting the Ustasi militia in these mountains. Meeting less than a month after the first Zizak detachment, communist partisans set to enlisting hundreds of ethnic Serbs to resist the eradication efforts of the Ustasi militiamen. They built a formidable hospital complex hidden in a ravine and took large amounts of civilians under their protection for the winter. Nada Dimic may very well have recuperated here after being broken out of a hospital in Zagreb. She'd been sent there after attempting suicide while under brutal interrogation. In January of 1942, the partisans captured an entire Ustasi garrison and steadily liberated more territory in the coming weeks. In March, the Ustasi initiated an offensive that only drove more civilians to the side of the partisans. They were nicknamed Rogul Jasi, after their main and only weapon, the pitchfork. In April, the Ustasi stormed and broke through in multiple positions around the mountainside. Trapped, the ethnic Serbs charged the better equipped and trained NDH forces. Over 300 were killed. Those who survived were sent to Jasenovac to die a different death. These were among the names that I'd seen scroll by in the darkness at Jasenovac. Had I known of her existence at the time, I could have waited for Nadadimic's name to appear, though her path here was a different one. She was working to ferry comrades to liberated territory when she was stopped on the street by Italian agents. Cornered, she pulled a revolver and shot 2 soldiers before being captured. She was transferred to the Ustasi and then, like in Zagreb, refused to give information despite brutal torture. Not knowing who she was, they sent her to Stara Gradiski, a subcamp of Jasenovac for women and children. There she was cared for by fellow partisans, but contracted typhus. In March 1942, she was executed by firing squad and buried in a mass grave. When the partisan forces arrived to liberate Jasenovac on May 2nd, 1945, they found nothing but the ashes and the smoldering bodies of the Ustasi's most recent victims. Knowing the war was lost, the Ustasi murdered all the last of the prisoners and burned the camp. Over the intervening 20 years, the site was abandoned, nearly erased, marked only by small makeshift memorials. And when the stone flower was built, it was not met with universal acceptance. Some ethnic Serbs felt its symbolism of rebirth and forgiveness, and even its beauty was akin to the cover-up of a horrific crime. I read a quote from the designer outside the museum, which still bears gunshot holes from its near destruction in the war of the 1990s. The melancholy, restressed concrete lotus not only stops evil thoughts on each end, but also has a certain cathartic power. It insults no one, it threatens no one, it does not encourage revenge, yet does not hide the truth. But as Spomenik scholar Nebel points out, the lotus has another meaning in Greek mythology, a state of blissful ignorance that the men of Odysseus experience on the Isle of the Lotus Eaters. Thus is the paradox of Tito's Spomeniks. The very abstractions meant to unite were too elusive to hold their meeting. In this way, they became monuments to forgetting. Memorials and monuments are meant to act as historical memory, seeking to freeze and locate it into the actual landscape. But memories are more like water than cement. The same river that flows from Zagreb flows past Zizak to Jasenovac, Nada's birth, captivity, and death. It is joined here by the Una River, whose banks saw the organization of the first Yugoslavian anti-fascist council, but also the massacre of Kulan Vakuf. Along their banks and across the former Yugoslavia, thousands of Spomeniks form an archipelago of tremendous sacrifice and ultimately victory. But in their decay, they are also recorders of brutality and the fading of memory. Orpheus spoke of parallel rivers in the underworld and warned the dead not to drink of the Lethe, the river of forgetfulness and concealment. Instead, they should seek the waters of Mnemosyne, the river of memory, and only in this way put an end to the wandering of their souls. But here the rivers of forgetting and memory come together and always flow to the sea of blood. Thank you.
So, Kevin, that is great. Kevin, you always out-punk me. So I'm going to be the last person to speak, and I have the really great fortune that I get to work with these musicians. And we're going to do a quick sound check, and then I'm going to show my contribution to the Partisans book. Yeah. Check one. Check one, check one. Little reverb on this. How's it sound, Tamara? Check one. You want to check levels, guys?
Yeah, you're coming right now. Yeah.
Ein, zwei, ein, zwei.
Mark's trying to get his policeman.
Ein, zwei, ein, zwei. Ein, zwei, ein, zwei. How's it sound, Tamara? Ein, zwei, okay. Ein, zwei, ein, zwei. Ein, zwei. Checking this, how's it sound?
Bring up this volume up a little bit. You want it to be more loud? Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
I think we're good. Just making sure that everything's.
You guys ready? You good? We good? So, I decided to write my piece about Yugoslavia too. I think maybe that's appropriate that we have two pieces about Yugoslavia because I think the breakup of Yugoslavia has a lot that we can learn from here in the United States. So I was also interested in that. So, in a period of less than 100 years, the country called Yugoslavia was created and destroyed twice. Central to this process was an organization committed to multiculturalism, Tito's Partisans. The roots of the Yugoslav conflict lie in a turf war between three empires: the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire. Residents came to identify with the various occupying powers. Croats identified with the Germans. Bosnians and Kosovars were the descendants of people who had converted to Islam under the Ottoman Turks. and the Serbs felt they were culturally Russian. In the First World War, these three empires destroyed each other. And from the ruins of empire, new nations arose. In theory, the Croats and others were tribes within the Union of Southern Slavs, or Yugoslavia. But in reality, Yugoslavia was ruled by a king who favored the Serb majority. The Ustasi were Croatian fascists who rebelled against the Serbian king. They thought of themselves as Germans. They believed they were racially superior to the other ethnic groups, and they sought the support of the Axis powers. In 1941, the Axis invaded, the king fled, and Yugoslavia was cut up into several countries, including Croatia, under the Ustasi, a Serbian state, all controlled by Germany. In the new Croatian state, the Ustasi engaged in genocide. They murdered Jews, Gypsies, but particularly they murdered Serbs. The Chetniks, Serbian nationalists loyal to the deposed king, were the first to resist the invading Germans. The Americans and the British loved the Chetniks. They liked their conservative and monarchist philosophy, and they supplied them with money and weapons, and there was even a corny Hollywood movie about the Chetniks. But it would turn out that the Chetniks were a lot more interested in preserving a Serb majority than they were in resisting the Nazis. The Yugoslav Communist Party, led by Tito, would organize a real resistance to the Nazis. The communists had already been banned by the king, so they knew how to run an underground organization. At first, the only uniform the partisans had was a hat, usually a stolen enemy hat with a red star painted on it. Such a uniform was easy to produce, hide, and distribute. This uniform emphasized the fact that the partisans were ordinary citizens and not a professional military. Tito's father was Croatian and his mother was Slovenian. Perhaps this informed Tito's unique vision of multiculturalism. Tito always sought to unite all the nationalities under one banner. In the first uprising, the partisans and the Chetniks fought side by side. The Germans responded with brutal collective punishment, killing 100 local people for every German soldier who died. So the Chetniks decided to stop fighting the Nazis in order to preserve their majority. The Chetniks had in effect become collaborators, and only the partisans continued the struggle. Everyone in the region had to be afraid of the German invaders, but they also had to fear their neighbors. Serbs had to be afraid of the Ustasi. Croats had to be afraid of the Chetniks. The only force open to everyone was the partisans. The partisans even issued an amnesty to collaborators so that defecting Chetniks and Ustasi could join them. Tito wanted everyone to be partisan, and soon it seemed that almost everyone was one. Moscow. Yugoslavia was genuinely independent. It had its own economic policy, its own alliances, and Tito remained popular for the rest of his life. Tito used his powers as dictator to punish anyone expressing Serbian, Croatian, or other nationalist views. And this was not restricted to people who were political. This applied to people who wrote Serbian or Croatian poetry. It applied to people who wrote history books that favored one nationality over the other. A lot of people were thrown in jail for the accusation of national sympathies under Tito. Tito was trying to keep Yugoslavia together by force. Can tolerance grow from the barrel of a gun? Tito died in 1980. In the 1990s, the country split into a number of small nations. And the Serbs invented a new phrase for an old concept, a phrase we're hearing a lot now: ethnic cleansing, that is, the forced migration of whole populations to create ethnically pure nation states. It was the worst European genocide since World War II. A country is created and destroyed twice. So what does that mean? Was dictatorship necessary? Or was dictatorship poor education? Had Tito failed to teach people tolerance? Or was this union of Southern Slavs just a bad idea? While the legacy of Tito's years in power seems ambiguous, the significance of the partisan struggle is clear. Tito's partisans proved that multiculturalism was stronger than National Socialism. Tito showed the world that the way to fight fascism was by uniting people around their common humanity. So this is a very new piece. It's still in rough sketches, and it's inspired by the people in this city who are fighting fascism now. It's inspired by the people I've met, young people who are squatting buildings in this neighborhood and all over the city, who are taking over buildings right now, and people who are doing all kinds of very courageous things. And so it goes out to them, and it's called A City. A city is not a prison, because prisoners are not required to pay thousands of dollars to be surveilled, to be exploited, to be policed. Such a city is not acceptable. Take the street. Tag the walls. Freeze the rent. Okay, this is a very old piece, but it still remains relevant.
Bring him up a little bit on his voice.
Actually, just talk directly into the mic.
Yeah, talk directly into that one for this one.
What's
Go directly into that when we do this.
And this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One. Yeah, one.
If you'll indulge us, we're going to do one more piece, and for this one, Jenny Gonzalez is going to sing. Jenny Gonzalez Blitz is going to sing.
That's been a few weeks to do.
Put your thing over to 89. And then turn it to 89, push down on it, and then turn up the red knob all the way over there on the first one.
Where's
Just
the
turn up
red knob?
Turn up the red one all the way. Over
It is
on
all
the
the
far
way
left.
up.
Yeah.
Right all the way up.
No, not that one.
Steps turned over.
No, not that one. It's that one.
Yeah,
No,
this
it's that one. It's that one. There we go. We're good. Go,
It's
go,
all
go,
the way
go.
up.
Seth or Jenny?
Go. Mark, let's go.
Thank you, everyone. That was Earth Blitz on drums, Andy Ladies on wind instruments, Mark Sloan on bass. I'm still in the
Doug
name of that.
Principato. Doug Principato.
Principato.
Doug.
Doug Principato on guitar, and Jenny Gonzalez Blitz on vocals. Continuity of Struggle, I really appreciate their support. I said that if anybody had questions about the book or comments about the book, they were welcome to ask them at the end of the night, and if anyone does, I think most of the artists are here and will be very willing to hear from you. Maybe we can have the lights up?
Pull the mic out on the other mic. Andy, just pull the volume down on that cord. Just pull that all the way down. Just slide the fader down. It's all the way down to the far right.
I did.
Okay, then it's down. Don't worry about it. Okay, cool.
There's also a cord right there.
So if there's anyone who has questions or comments about the book, we're very open to hearing that and discussing that.
How long has Continuity of Struggle been together?
How long has Continuity of Struggle been out? We actually did that, or the group.
Yeah.
I've been working with Eric for 20 years, my fucking God.
It's more than that.
More than that,
So
yeah.
it's 2000,
25.
2002
Yeah.
was the first version of the
Yeah.
band. Andy's been in 17 of those years, 16 years of that. Mark's been in, I don't know, you've been in more than that. You've been in a few years, and Doug is on his trial by fire here tonight. This is his first night with us.
And the musical compositions, some of them really came out of working with Sibel Blood and John Wagner in the 90s. Right, I was working with them too. So yeah, we've been messing around with this music and comics thing for a little bit of a while.
That sounded great, you guys. The visuals and everything is just.
Most of us have played in bands longer than we probably like to admit to.
Longer than some of the people in the room have been alive. Eric has been playing in punk bands and jazz bands.
So have all these guys.
It really flowed visually. The first one, when you were speaking, Seth, when you were like, that was like almost like nausea hitting you. It was like super loud, right? And really good, really effective. Yeah.
Agreed.
But everything, the flow of the visuals and the sound piece is, I think, perfect. Thank you.
So does anyone have a question about the book?
I didn't remember to mention that Between the Lines Press, the editors and publishers, and AK Press, the distributors, are tremendous people to work with. And I know they're gonna have copies of the book in San Francisco on December 7th at the Howard Zinn Book Festival. So if anybody's gonna be in that area on that day.
Howard Zinn Book Festival's in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
In San Francisco, yeah. Yeah, there should be copies. Are there still copies left? You have copies over there? Yeah, cool. Yeah, we got those too.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
Have you thought about attaching an address for some music with the books? So you buy your book and you have a place you can go to musically accompany your listening or your reading time.
Do you know someone that
That's
wants
a
to
great
put that
idea.
out?
That's a great idea.
Do you know someone that might want to put something like that out? There is one video on YouTube of one of the pieces. There is other stuff that's recorded and other stuff that will be, and certainly if there's interest.
Maybe we should put it on Bandcamp.
Yeah, we've kind of been looking for places to put the soundtrack out for a while. We do have a little bit of it on YouTube. Isabella, could you talk a little bit more about your process of interviewing your mom and how it came about? And you can use the mic if you want, Isabella.
Of course.
Process, well, yes, so actually it was Paul who set me up with Louisa.
No, she's not a woman.
And then because we had these Zoom meetings with Louisa, she would sort of draw out the stories from my mom in a different way, because usually it's different when you're talking to somebody you've just met versus talking to your own daughter. So it really helped to give a different perspective to the whole thing. And then Louisa herself was a part of the feminist movement in Italy in the 1970s, which was an interesting movement, and it was a pretty turbulent time in Italy as well. There were big strikes at the Fiat factory, and there was the Brigate Rosse, who were doing actions, very controversial actions. And of course now they have neo-fascism in Italy again. So it was very useful for my mom to be able to speak in her own language with somebody who had a more current perspective. So that really was instrumental in drawing her out. Yeah.
For how many years have you been doing interviews with her?
Actually, honestly, it's since that January 2017, because she felt so compelled to alert us all to the similarities she was hearing, that she felt like, okay, I better talk about this now because it's happening. So,
Didn't you do some pieces with her earlier?
I did, yes, I did a little bit. But not so clearly connected to this theme. Yeah. But yeah, she always had she's a good storyteller.
So was that her line, mostly with hair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, she's pretty funny. She does complain about paying a lot of money to eat a plate of polenta. It just doesn't make sense to her. And that was, the details about cooking and eating were always interesting to me, and it was very practical on the field to have this. It was this dry cornmeal. It doesn't weigh very much, and all you need to cook it is some hot water, and then it's very filling. So, yeah, that was part of it, and just the details about how they got around, and after her apartment building was bombed, the windows were smashed, there was no utilities, so they were freezing, they were cold, and but they still had, school was still open. So for example, her classmate whose family had a farm would bring wood to burn in the classroom to keep warm while school was going, but then other kids were encouraged to just bring furniture to burn. And I remember hearing details like that of the people in Gaza when they were desperate to heat up their water and food. So you just, once you hear stories of like how women and children survive, things start to sound very familiar. The food shortages and the lack of heat and utilities. Of course, the hospitals were always full, not always full because of injured soldiers, but often full from fevers, typhoid, things like that. Yeah.
I'm curious, to what extent were you aware that your mother had this history when you were growing up?
She did hide some of the harder stories from us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think when she saw this stuff coming, and she felt compelled to say it in a different way. Like there was a story about everybody was using their bikes or trying to get out of town because a new bombing was announced, and they were going over a little low bridge, and there was rice fields on either side, and on one side the rice fields were full of water, on the other side they were dry, and whoever jumped into the side that was full of water survived, and the others didn't. And then she managed to get across the bridge and hid in a grain silo, a brick grain silo, until the bombings were gone. So just like weird little narrow escapes like that.
when you learned this stuff about your mother's past, did some of the things you experienced with her when you were younger make more sense?
Yes, totally. She was compulsive about smuggling things. We would go on holiday and there'd be this big sign, please do not bring any fruit with you across the border. And then, you know, she'd be like, I got mangoes. You know, she would be proud of her ability to smuggle things and get bargains and, you know, just like, I mean, some of that is cultural. A lot of Mediterranean people will compulsively bargain with you. But the smuggling, I think, was a point of pride from having to do that during the war. And I know a lot of people in this audience have parents who probably did things like that. I know Harley, your dad fought Nazis, right? He was doing that. Yeah.
Tamara, I don't think I knew your work before this project.
Yeah.
I was totally blown away looking at the piece today.
Oh, thank you. You should check out me and Raymond. We have a book out now called Black Coal, Red Bandanas, about the labor movement with Mother Jones and the Battle of Blair Mountain. And it's a long form graphic novel that the two of us did together, and it's got a lot more of that. You guys are thank you.
Yeah, it's very good.
That's getting into your territory, Raymond, right?
Yeah. What was your process like with Paul figuring out this book?
Paul initially had come up with the idea for the book, and then it was messaging the usual suspects. I've actually been a big fan of, honestly, everybody who worked on this book. I was a fan of their work in some sort of a way, including Summers before we had worked on Black Hole and Red Bandanas together. So really my primary job was not to be geeky and weird with everybody, because like I'm a big fan of World War III. I said before that like, you know, I probably wouldn't write comics if it wasn't for Harvey Piccola. I probably wouldn't do these kind of comics if it wasn't for World War III. So it's just kind of a strange situation to be like, oh, these people who I really, really like their stuff is all working on this book, and it was really a pleasure to work with everybody. But for an editing process, you kind of just let them do their stuff, and that's really about it. Like, our job is to see the project from beginning to end, raise the money for the project, and make sure that everything kind of feels cohesive, you know, because a lot of the artists, they come to you and they have ideas for what they want to do, and that's perfect. But then, you know, before you say yes to those ideas, right, you have to think about how it's going to play out in the rest of the book. So if you get the book and you're thinking, wow, all of these individual pieces are amazing, but it doesn't work as a book, that would be the editor's fault, right? Which hopefully you don't think that, but like that would be the editor's fault if that was the case. So that's kind of the process of doing a book like this.
I remember when I was getting emails from Paul about this project, he was kind of almost a little apologetic that it was a book about a war. You know, he was like, well, I'm really anti-war, but I guess we're doing this book.
Yeah.
You know, and I kind of wondered what your discourse with him about that was.
That's a good question. I think it's kind of hard to do. Sometimes you can do any sort of war book, even if it would be, you know, what, like the 1950s DC comics, right, would be called anti-war. There's still some jingles in there, right? There's still some nationalism within the text of the books. And so, you know, kind of the way to combat that is actually an anthology of a bunch of different people representing a bunch of different things. And, you know, that was the discussion about.
So there's this other rumor I've heard that you and Paul are putting together an anthology about Zoran Mamdani, and you're looking for a publisher. Is that true?
We're not sure yet.
And you're looking for people to illustrate it?
We've been this has been an idea that has been batted around right now. Right now, our biggest projects that we're doing is a project about C.L.R. James, the great Marxist historian, and we are also working on a graphic history of anarchism and the labor movement and direct action. And so, you know, those are really the primary projects right now. And the other one we would really like to do because it would be fun, like, you know, with everything going on. So yeah.
And I've also heard a rumor about myself that I'm looking for a publisher for a comic strip based on an interview with Stanley Cohen, who is the lawyer for Hamas. And I've heard a rumor that I'm having trouble finding a publisher. But I don't know if it's true or not. And anyone else want to spread a rumor?
Well, I wanted to ask Kevin, how was it that your piece was incredible? It was. I felt like I was in the places. The combination of the art. Somehow, I don't know how you did it, but I felt like I was there. And I was wondering, how was it to be with your family there?
Well,
Incredible.
so what's interesting is that when I went there, like there is the line in there. It's like that. I sometimes go on these trips with my family. They're just drawing trips, and like where like I draw and they like bring their books and read. And I did not. This story was written like 3 or 4 years after the trip, so it was not. The choices really were totally aesthetic, like the monuments I wanted to go to, and then only when Paul asked me if I'd be interested in doing something, did I research it and realize that they were all very much connected. Like when I started reading about different partisans, and then when I found that Dimmick had been in all of these places, it was like the hairs went back, back in my head. I really felt like, well, this story just kind of fits in this way. But I also said to Paul, I said, this was the only story I could do, because I've really kind of decided around 2017 or so, 2016, that I'm trying to only do stories about places I've been physically, like that I'm in physically, because I've been working on a book about walking through landscapes and being in landscapes. So I've only done a few things that are not in actual places I visited. But I'm glad you felt that, because that was really much. I mean, I did keep a really extensive journals as I was there writing, and a lot of the feelings I had were feelings I had. I mean, the part of the story about how I felt like I was seeing this really glorious history that's completely forgotten and abandoned was something I felt at the time. Like I was, and it was only through subsequent research that I realized why this, and with the 90s war being a big part of it, but realize why this history is kind of forgotten. I mean, another part of the story would be that given that Tito was still like a communist socialist, America didn't want to necessarily elevate the story of these partisans, because they were the most effective partisans in the war, and they had probably a much bigger effect than anybody. I think in Europe people would acknowledge the Yugoslavian partisans were a major part of the reason that the Axis was defeated, and that's not a narrative that we grow up with here in America, and I think that has to do with Cold War politics. Yeah, I felt very lucky to have this come across my desk and to find a way to process this material. So.
How did you know about those monuments? How did you find out?
Years ago at the Strand, I saw a book on Soviet architecture. There's this book called Soviet Bus Stops about all these really cool designed bus stops all over the Soviet Union, and they're out in the middle of nowhere. So I was kind of aware of the stuff already. And it was actually my wife she was like, well, we should go to Croatia. It's like really, she was showing me the Adriatic and everything. And I knew that these were there. And so I, built the trip around, those two interests, hanging out on the Adriatic and going to these sites. So.
Yeah, I'm with her. I felt like I was really there almost, like
Well, that's great.
watching it, and I can't wait to hold the book in my hand and read it. But that's $25.
If you did a Kickstarter, you'd have it already.
And Sabrina's book cover is here as well. That issues will be illustrated as well.
The set was from the show tonight.
To sign.
The set.